I'm here with Alex Walker, who is the Mayor of the Central Hawke's Bay District Council. Kia ora, Alex, and thanks for joining me.
Kia ora, Andrew. Pleasure to be here.
Alex, obviously it's been a big year, and we look back and February, can't believe it's was February when basically the region's world changed, if you like, with Cyclone Gabriel. How has the recovery effort been going since then?
Well, to be honest, it feels surreal, Andrew. It's the end of the year, and I've been looking back at what I was doing 12 months ago, and I was writing Christmas messages for the end of the year at the end of the wettest calendar year on record in this part of the region, and talking about how 2023 had to be bigger and brighter, considering how wet it was and the things we had to deal with. And so it does feel a bit odd to be now 12 months down the track. The sun is out now, but on the back of that incredibly wet 2022, and then on top of that, the cyclone. Look, it has just been the most crazy couple of years, and it's really heartening to see the sun's out. There's a bit of positivity. There are people making their way back into their homes. Work is underway in the recovery. We've got some pretty major pieces of road work that are underway, and our progress on protecting our communities against stop banks and Waipawa are back in place. We're a part of the way through a process in Pōrongaho around stop banks and raising properties and what the future looks like. And when I look back to think in 10 months what we've achieved, both as a region and as a district, it's actually pretty incredible to think where we've come from and managed to get to. It's not all done, but we have actually done a heck of a lot.
Because everyone, when they think of the cyclone, they think of Napier, Hastings, and that was where the worst was, and to an extent, Tairāwhiti as well. But you mentioned Waipawa and you also Pōrongaho. Those were quite badly hit. Just tell us the progress there. You talk about the stock bank rebuilding and that, how things are going there.
Yeah, so we actually quite regularly have said to visitors to the region, and particularly ones that come from Wellington, Andrew, it's easy to fly into Napier Airport and to spend a bit of time in kind of that 10-minute radius of the airport, and you can see some really tragic things from what happened in the cyclone. And I always point out that if you hop in a car and drive 2 hours to the north and through Wairoa to Mahia, you can see flooded communities and devastation, and you can travel 2 hours to the south from Napier Airport and come through Waipawa and Waipokoro and get down to Pōrongaho at the coast, and you can see devastation there as well. And look, the towns of Waipawa and Pōrongaho in particular have come a long way, but still a lot to do. We had several hundred that were yellow stickered, and only very small handful that were red stickered. Waipawa was category 2C, which meant that the regional council had fixed the stop banks along the Waipawa River. They could get back into rebuilding and fixing their properties. Everyone's getting pretty close. There's still a handful in Waipawa that have not yet got their properties back to the livable standard. But the biggest one is in Pōrongaho, where there's 130 properties that are still in category 2A. And there are about 30 houses that are still yellow stickered and still in the process of coming back to be livable. That community out there has been incredibly staunch and are doing very amazing work, while still confronted with the uncertainty of stop banks and drainage and raising properties, and how is all that mix going to look to strengthen their community for the future. And it's still uncertain for them, so that's a bit of a load to carry into Christmas, but they are doing it with good spirit.
Yeah, because obviously, apart from the human toll and the displacement and that, there's also the infrastructure. And you're a council, a rural council that has many roads and that you're responsible for. How are the sort of arteries of the region? How's the sort of reconstruction and redevelopment of those arteries going?
Yeah, so slowly. Slowly. There's a huge amount of work to do. So we actually just had a recent update in our council meeting last week on the scope of remaining works to do on the roads. And it looks like the final tally of damage is probably going to be getting close to $180 million. We've had 35 million of 99 to 100% funding assistance from the government on the early stages. We're about 3/4 of the way through that, which is restoring links to get households and communities back up and running. But there is a very, very long way for us to go to get to anywhere near the state that our roads were in previously. There has been quite considerable work clearing drains, moving slips, making bridge approaches safe again, but we've still got a number of bridges that are still not intact. Structural works are underway, and it's going to take us quite some time to get through that. We've got some places where community are really practical. Around Ortani, for instance, they lost a bridge on Todd Road, but the community have said to us, actually, don't make that an urgent priority, council. We can live with the 5-minute extra workaround without that bridge, and find other priorities to get to work on first. So there's some real maturity coming from our community, and we're doing the best to move through it at some pace. The challenge, I think, right now in front of us, as of like this week, is the sun's out. People really want to go to the beach. People will be going to the beach, but Porongaho Road to the coast there and Podere Road to the coast there in particular have still got a number of outstanding slips, underslips, and issues where there's traffic management, traffic lights, stop goes, and everyone's just going to have to be patient, not just this summer, but for quite some time yet.
Now, in terms of the rebuild, how much future-proofing is going on? So are you, because I mean, some of those bridges and things like that were one in 500 years or whatever. How much future-proofing, and what can you do to make things stronger and better?
Yeah, so we are, there's quite a number of bridges where we've done what's required to get them back open again, for trucks in particular, because in a rural place like this, getting trucks through the roads and over the bridges is the main thing to keep the community and the economy moving. But there are places that we've had to put temporary fixes in place. Some of those places, like at Wakarara, for instance, where we're now able to move in and rebuild to a better standard. But it's not going to be possible to rebuild absolutely everything to how it was. We're trying to consolidate that to the key routes. And in fact, what we did over the last few months is we've been around 9 different localities around the district and have put the maps of the local roads for their part of the district in front of them. And we've talked through, what's the most important route to you? What's the number 2 backup? And trying to consolidate our activity like that. And our community have been really generous and hands-on on helping go through that. So we have got priority routes that connect those communities that have been given the first ability to build back. It's not really about better, to be honest. This is just still about survival and connectivity.
Now, obviously, this all costs money, and you say there has been funding coming through from central government. But what are your coffers looking like? What are your debt levels looking like at this moment as a council?
Yeah, sure. So we're sitting at about 42 million of external debt currently. That's about 2/3 of the way to where our debt cap would be. The trick at the moment is, of course, the interest rates, like households and other businesses are facing. Interest rates so much higher than they were even 2 years ago. And so the interest costs on debt repayment are really significant. They're going to play a really significant role into what our 3-year plan budgets going into the next year are going to look like.
What are we talking about? What interest rates are we talking about? How much are you talking about?
On debt finance, debt repayments. And so that's going to be...
What sort of figure are we looking at? What sort of figure are we looking at?
So for the debt repayments in particular, that could lift rates by 6% before we do anything else. Wow. So it's a pretty significant number.
So what are you expecting the rates rise this time to be?
We're still not at the point we even have got a secure number. It could be anywhere between 20 and 30%, depending on how the different pieces come together. It is big. And the frustrating
Oh.
thing is there's more to do than we've ever had to do. And it's going to cost us more to basically deliver less. The inflationary environment that we're in for a council like ours is very, very challenging.
So you're predicting between 20 and 30% rates increase in the next round?
That is highly possible. Our councillors, we had a council meeting last week, and our councillors endorsed a direction to staff, which was to work on two options. So the first one is trying to maintain the level of service of all of our key activities, and any additional activities to be focused on roading recovery and our Three Waters recovery as well. And then the second option to be, let's keep focused on the Three Waters recovery and on the roading recovery, but how do we downscale other activities in the short term with a plan to then bring them back again over the next 3 to 5 years? So we're seriously looking at what reducing levels of service on everything else looks like for us to come through this. We've got a trade-off almost going on where we've got significant Three Waters investment to occur, but we've also got significant roading investment, and it's like we can't play both cards at exactly the same time. We're having to get a bit clever about how we phase that.
Yeah. Now, last time we spoke, you mentioned that you think the system, the model of local government is broken in New Zealand. Now we've got a new government coming in, that's come in. Have you had much communication with them since they've come in? I know there was a joint briefing that was brought together, but have you had any personal interaction with ministers at all?
Yes, absolutely. So all of the leadership of Hawke's Bay met with the Prime Minister last Friday, and with him, Minister Simeon Brown, who is the Minister of Transport and helpfully the Minister of Local Government as well, and Minister Mark Mitchell, who's Emergency Management and Recovery. We've since had another follow-up meeting with Minister Brown on transport issues. And I've also been to Wellington to meet with Mark Patterson, who is the Minister of Rural Communities, who's really interested in the nuances of how we look after resilience and affordability in the rural landscape in New Zealand in particular. So there's some pretty hefty conversations going on. But look, what we're hearing and what we're seeing is that the financial pressure is on the government books too, as well as the local government books. And we've got a pretty extraordinary situation playing out in front of us right now. And for us, as local government is I suppose, the taker of what government will support us with, there's a bit of weight and uncertainty that we've got to deal with as the new government gets to grips with which levers they're going to pull and where they're going to invest and where they're not.
Because so far it seems like they're cutting things. Is there anything that you worried that you as a council or region has got in plans going forward that they might cut?
So one of the things that I'm concerned about is we've got some particular recovery issues around our Three Waters network. So you might recall that after the cyclone, we had about 5 weeks where Waipawa and Otani didn't have drinking water because the stop bank protecting the Waipawa bore and treatment plant broke and flooded, and it took us quite some time to rebuild that and get it back up and running. We've got, as we negotiated with the Crown around the categorisation of land and the financial package to support that, the Crown would not engage with us on what to support on recovery in those drinking water and Three Waters types assets look like. I'm really worried about where those applications now sit with the new government. We've got the population of nearly half of our district is associated with that drinking water network, and right now it is at quite some extreme risk. And we continue to have those conversations. Really, really important to be a safe and healthy community to get that sorted.
Now, the one thing the Prime Minister was quite impressed with, and he said so, was the way Hawke's Bay as a region came together and presented a briefing and that for the new government. How important is it working together with that Matariki group and the wider leadership group in Hawke's Bay?
Oh, look, it's absolutely vital, actually. What we've found is that a strong, clear, and consistent message from the region is so much more helpful in Wellington about how to get around priorities. And I think what I've seen across the leadership of Hawke's Bay, across the councils, and across our iwi mana whenua partners as well, is that as a region, we understand where the priorities sit. And it's not about Central Hawke's Bay campaigning for the attention compared to Hastings. Actually, we know that our communities are connected and we've got to present with what really are the regional priorities. So right now, State Highway 2 to Wairoa is undeniably a regional priority.
Yeah.
And that's not because it directly affects my community, but it affects the success of the region. And that makes a very powerful message.
Yeah, but you still believe that it's important to have separate councils. You wouldn't be in favor of any amalgamation or anything. You believe that it's important for your council to be as it is and going forward, just with more support from central government.
I think that, yes, the local identities are important, but I think we need to think carefully about what are the right activities to be delivered and funded at the local level. And our pathway over the last few years on our Hawke's Bay Three Waters model is a really good example of where, yes, there's diverse local needs across the different councils, but when it comes to the funding and operationalising of that larger infrastructure need, it makes sense for us to be working together in a way that that does that as a collective. So I think we're going to see a period of time where there are pretty deep conversations about the right activities to be led and funded at a local level compared to a regional level. And I think that will start to then inform what the right form is for local government when we get function a lot more clear. And I think that the new government's focus on long-term pipelines of infrastructure investment and delivery is probably going to help us navigate that.
And now you've got two local MPs, Catherine Wedd and Mike Butterick. Have you had much communication with them?
Yes, I have. They've been really supportive, and I had spent some time with all candidates standing actually before the election to get them across what the recovery situation looked like for Central Hawke's Bay, what the financial situations look like for the council, and what that meant for the future. And since then, Catherine and Mike have both been in the district, have spent time on a number of issues with them. And as they're getting their feet under the table, actually the teamwork between us and them is important too. They're figuring out how to navigate the government channels. And sometimes we know how to get those things done too. So we're trying to bring them into the team and work together as well.
Good. And any other issues facing Central Hawke's Bay that you'd like to raise?
I think it's important to talk about the wider damage and recovery that's required in a district like Central Hawke's Bay. So from a council perspective, I've already spoken about roading and water, drinking water. But actually in wastewater treatment and in stormwater networks, there's also now considerably more work to do. Our wastewater treatment plants are in a process of upgrade to meet new consent conditions and to move into a completely different treatment arena. But quite a number of them have been directly impacted by flooding, where the river came through, completely flooded through the Waipawa wastewater treatment plant. It has had quite a significant impact on the land area in Takapo, where irrigation to land is very soon to need to get up underway. And same in Pōrangaho, where the wastewater treatment plants were also affected by where the water went. So in terms of that future resilience and building back better, we're in a slightly different space now where we've got to recover from those impacts as well. None of those things are on the radar of what government support looks like because they've all been focused on what does reform and repeal and reform look like. So those are on the radar for us too. Makes it difficult to make short-term decisions about what to do next because it's uncertain. And the other thing is then about the recovery in our primary sector, who have lost many thousands of hectares of land through slips, through flooding, loss of infrastructure, and it's a slow road for some of those farmers to be able to rebuild and get their stock numbers and their crops back up and running. And you think now, particularly our sheep farmers, land prices aren't that great this season. And so even the cash flow to continue recovery for those farming businesses is challenging. And we have to take that into consideration as we then prioritise how we get the rest of the recovery going, if the wallets and the pockets of our households and our businesses are also severely constrained.
Yeah, and obviously, if there's a huge rate rise on that as well, that's going to have an impact on people.
It does. It absolutely will, and it's putting pressure on people's household incomes. And I have to admit that it feels a bit odd, to be honest. We've been raising rates significantly for the last few years. The rates in Central Hawke's Bay are more than 40% higher now than when I started 7 years ago. We've been significantly raising rates. And so that raise is there, but we've got a central government regime which is in the process of laying out tax cuts and how to get more money into the back pockets. It feels like we're almost operating in opposition to each other, where tax cuts are going to deliver more money into household pockets, but then the inflation and cost coming to councils just means that it could just nullify that. That feels like a really odd place to be in. I don't know how we resolve that, but it does feel like we're at odds.
Because the government has indicated that it's all taxpayers, whether it's ratepayers or taxpayers, it's still the same money. But yeah, is this something you raising with the government?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because it also comes down to what the messaging and the leadership looks like of how we navigate this economic chapter in our lives, because it will only be a chapter, or maybe even just a few pages of a chapter,
Yeah.
and to have a narrative from local leadership, which is quite different to that of central leadership, is challenging for people to navigate, and they shouldn't have to. I think we need to do a better job of getting that messaging consistent, but it is difficult.
Now, you said you've been here 7 years as mayor, and how many more to come? Are you going to stand? I know it's still a way to go before the next election. What you feeling like? You got another term in you?
Yeah, so Andrew, the way I approach this is that I still absolutely love and feel the privilege every day of being in this job. I get out of bed every day knowing that I can add value and I enjoy doing that. And I just keep on the path while that is still true. There will come time in the future where I need to reevaluate that. I've got teenage children. We start to move into our different phases of life. I'll evaluate that as I get to it. But right now, still absolutely love and privileged by this job, and hope to continue for as long as I can.
And I've asked you this before, any eyes on central government, on being an MP for the region?
Absolutely not. Why would you want to be part of that circus at the moment? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Again, love what I'm doing here. And you know what the real privilege in local government is? You can act and lead and make decisions that impact people's daily lives immediately, and can be in a really good way. And I think that's a real privilege. And to be further removed from that doesn't really float my boat. So I'm nice and close, and we can make a difference.
Alex Walker, thank you so much for your time and have a good Christmas.
Have a very Merry Christmas, and I know everyone in Hawke's Bay absolutely deserves a well-earned holiday. Let's hope the sun keeps shining for us while we enjoy time with our family and friends, and everybody make the most of that break, because we're going to need batteries recharged for 2024. It's going to be another big year.